and welcome to this week's edition of What You Need to Know, a Canadian Polycast. I'm Alison Fair, a consultant here at Bluesky Strategy Group, and I have the pleasure, as always, is being joined by my colleagues, the Honourable Andrew Leslie, Neil Brody, and Cam Holstrom. Hello to you all.
Hello, hello.
So we've got a lot coming up here in Ottawa. Of course, Ottawa is getting a lot of attention right now because of the trucker convoy, but I want to get away from that. The reason why we're here is to discuss the return of Parliament on Monday. So I'd like to briefly ask you guys, what are you specifically looking for? Andrew, let's start with you.
Thanks, Alison. I'm going to be focusing on things that are happening in Parliament but far away, specifically on foreign affairs, national security, defense issues, and international trade.
Why? What are those things that are particular to you?
Well, we've got the Russia-Ukraine crisis bubbling away, and that has an impact on NATO. That has an impact on, believe it or not, investment. I'm also looking at what China and Taiwan tensions might result in and what impact that will have on consumer confidence. There's issues about border security that has an impact on the flow of goods and services, whether or not workers are vaccinated or unvaccinated. There's a bunch of defense issues, which are of critical importance, starting with the cultural change and also defense capabilities. And then, of course, we've got a variety of issues with national security. And what does that mean? What is the threats? What are the threats out there? How are we working with our friends and allies? So lots going on.
Neil, let's go to you. What are you looking for specifically when it comes to the House returning on Monday?
I'm hoping for the next stretch of Parliament through to June is to actually see the government get down to business. They made great fanfare coming out of the election in September that they had 12 pieces of legislation that they wanted to introduce in the first 100 days after the election. Well, 100 days was up at the end of the calendar year. They introduced, I think, 5 or 6 pieces of legislation in the 2 or 3 weeks they met before the holidays or the break. They passed 3 of them, which was great. But they've still got a whole host of things that they would like to do. Not that I agree with all of them, but this is a government that doesn't work very hard. In the last Parliament, over 2 years, they introduced 56 pieces of legislation, passed 30 of them, but 14 of those were just tied to money bills. They were essentially granting the public service the right to use money. You elect politicians to go to Ottawa and work. So that's gone by the wayside. And with that has gone, the other work of Parliament, which is implement your platform. And not that I love the Liberal platform, because as I like to say, I put the blue in blue sky. But it'd be nice to actually see them do some work and earn their wage.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I mean, we do have a pandemic, so we can't all be here, and at least we're doing a hybrid. So I'll give the Liberals that reasoning there.
So we can go grocery shopping safely, but we can't meet Parliament safely. It's always been a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah. All right, Cam, off to you. What are you specifically looking for when the House returns on Monday?
Well, I'm going to take a little riff off of what Neil said, because I do disagree with part of what he said. I agree with the fact that, the last 2 years have not been the most productive in Parliament because we've had a pandemic. Events threw things off, and nobody saw that coming when things had to shut down in March of 2020. And let's just be honest, that we had just had an election that fall. I think there might have been 2 months of proper sitting before COVID hit. It even got so bad that we hadn't even had private members' business start when that happened. So we actually went a full year plus without private members' bills even being debated in the House because COVID.
Is that a record? Like, is that that's not?
No, that's not normal at all.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my point. Is that COVID became the focus, and it needed to be the focus. So I can be okay with that. But now we're in a period where really this is probably the first time in almost 2 years this government has an opportunity to actually govern. Yes, COVID is still an issue, and there are still things to deal with there, and it's not going to be gone till it's gone. But now after 2 years, you've got a better handle on this, and you're able to do other things at the same time. You have more balls you can juggle because you know how to deal with those COVID balls that are in the air. And I think that's what I'm looking for. The fact is that you've got a period now where people don't want to see another election, especially after an election that people generally feel should not have happened to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this minority parliament, because of its makeup, has the opportunity to last a good 3 years. But with that being the case, this first year is a great opportunity to actually move on some of these priorities, especially the ones where the government and the opposition and the other 2 or 3 opposition parties generally agree.
Any
Well,
specifics?
like the changes to the Broadcast Act, which will come forward, which died in the Senate last time. That's
Yeah.
a prime example where 3 of the 4 parties in the House agreed. And frankly, if there had been a bit more time and there had been an election, that would have become law and been done. That was one of the 100-day bills that Neil mentioned, and obviously the 100 days have passed. I'm going to be curious to see how soon that comes in this parliament, because again, those are things that can get done. The only thing that could throw that off, taking a tip to what Andrew said, are world events.
I agree with you. Andy, briefly before I ask my next specific, you were government whip. The 100 days and some of these bills as the Broadcast Act that Cam saw, can they get this done? Is this because it was really primarily all done? Do you really see that being done within, a month after the House returns?
Well, to build on what Neil was saying, Allison, if you really want to get it done, you can. The tools are there. The government now has over 6 years experience in getting things through the House that it really wants to get done. They were able to compromise on a variety of issues, which were incredibly complicated.
Okay, so we can get it done.
It's just, do they want it? And
Okay.
getting back to Neil's point, it's hard to get things done. One thing you do tend to run out of in Parliament is time. And it's the government's decision how often the MPs show up.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it's not their fault. It's the fault of the people who make those sorts of decisions. How often have the MPs actually been in Parliament, either remotely or in person, to actually get stuff done? And the answer is over the last 2 years, and well, 2.5 years, not a lot. Good reasons, explainable reasons, but I'll build on Cam's point, the excuses are running out.
Okay, like it there. So I'd like to go on to the next is, we looked at specifics. Are there specific ministers or minister that you guys are looking at and why? Neil, I'll start with you.
Off the top of my head, I would say ministers to look at is, of course, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, perhaps Ms. Anand, Ms. Jolie, and Ms. Anand, Ms. Jolie, and Mr. Champagne, because it looks like the engine to replace Justin Trudeau is warming up. There's a number of books coming out about a number of personalities in the Liberal Party, and I don't know if Mr. Trudeau can make it through the next session of Parliament, maintaining his position as the leader of the party. I don't mean he's going to get voted out. I just mean that there'll be a push to promote various personalities as they jockey for position. Since I think inside the Liberal Party, they don't think they can go into the next election with Mr. Trudeau as leader.
I always find that funny. We just had an election in November, and it was like, why do we need to be thinking about leadership right now? There's too much leadership talk. Like, I know it's politics, but I just wish all these parties would just get on with the business. Let's leave leadership for a little bit and.
Okay, I'll play along with you. The only minister I look to see in the next session is the Prime Minister.
Cam, who is there a specific minister or ministers that you're looking at?
I'm going to stay away from the leadership politics for now because I've already said publicly I believe there are going to be 3 leadership races and the Liberals will be one before the next election, but we'll let that deal with itself. The 2 ministers I'm going to be watching most closely actually are Minister Mark Miller and Minister Stephen Guilbeault for different reasons. Minister Miller's got big policy on his plate, and he's proven himself so far to be not only able to deliver, but having the will to deliver. The settlement agreement that still needs to be ratified on First Nations children in care.
Yep.
That was an act of political will that the government has not found the will to do for the last few years. And the fact that he got the job done, I think, speaks loudly. And now he needs to see that across the finish line. and that's not going to be an easy task for
No.
this government. Yeah, but I'm also watching Minister Guilbeault for another reason. Um, Minister Guilbeault was not a solid performer in his previous role at Heritage. To say that he had problems communicating with the public, I think would be a very polite and generous statement. And unfortunately, I'm starting to see some of the the same mistakes repeat themselves in his new role. There was the video that Aaron O'Toole put out about supposedly wanting to end fossil fuel within 18 months. That's not what he meant to say. That's not what he said, but he wasn't clear in what he said either. Like let's just be honest, let's just be fair about it. Is that I knew what he meant. I know what he meant, but it's not like he was the clearest communicator in that. And you can only get so many of those mistakes and get by, especially when the opposition knows you're weak and are looking for you to slip up. I don't know how much longer he can manage like that. I'm hoping for the best, but it's like with the track record that he has, they had to know this was the risk of him going in. So if I had to put my money down on the first cabinet shuffle of the 44th Parliament,
Yeah.
if I had to put my marker down for who's the first person to get shuffled out, he's my odds-on favorite leading that pool at this point.
Okay, well, we'll hold you to that. How long do you think it will be before he's shuffled out, if that's the case?
I don't think there'll be a shuffle this year. I think it happens in sometime 2023, but I think he's at the top of the list of most likely to get shuffled.
Okay, sounds like he's going to need a lot of communications help. So we'll see if that bodes in his favor. Andy, I'll end with you. What ministers are you looking at and why?
Well, I would like to focus on ministers that will unite rather than divide. I would like to focus on ministers that inspire rather than engage in continual criticism.
Okay, and who are they?
Well, I'll get to that in a sec. So what I'm trying to avoid is, to quote somebody else, I'm trying to avoid the negative nabobs who essentially do nothing but hector and cause fractures within the larger population. So I'd like to focus on three. Minister of Defense, Anita Anand, who, by the way, I think has had a tremendously good start. A breath of fresh air, decisive, charismatic, very good in front of the TV, can handle obviously multiple complex issues at once, and she's starting to flex her muscles. She got her former deputy minister at procurement to come over to defense. She's done quite a bit of shaking up inside the ranks of D&D with some cultural issues, which come down to an abuse of power, and she's tackling that. She's making decisions on recommendations that languished for 6 years before her arrival. But there's some big challenges that loom. Obviously, the issue with NATO, and yes, that's part of foreign affairs, but also, there's defense procurement. She has an armed forces that's 10,000 people short right now, where they need jet fighters, they need ships, they need a whole host of other activities and things that take a long time to put in place.
Who are your other two?
Melanie Joly. She has come out of some tough jobs, really tough jobs, but quite low profile overall in terms of a cabinet ranking, to the number one or number two job, just depending on your perspective. Certainly within the top two, and she's started like a fireball. And the third is Mark Miller. Very impressive abilities at handling incredibly sensitive, tragic files in a humane yet decisive manner, low key. But there's no doubt that he's in charge. There's no doubt that he's listening extraordinarily closely to the affected Indigenous communities. He's giving them all the respect that one might ask of him, to the extent of learning an Indigenous language with some remarkable facility. And overall, an impressive politician who I think is underestimated and a uniter.
Yeah. You know what? Both you and Cam had him in there, and I'd have to agree. He is very impressive in how he goes about his work.
And you know, to me, that's the key thing, is that I think there have been many well-meaning ministers who have found themselves in those roles, but unfortunately for them, we Indigenous people's been happy to see the backside of them when they left, because they never delivered on what was being promised. And I think Miller has made a very clear point that he is not going to be that person.
Yeah.
He's not going because I honestly believe that the Indigenous person, he cares about what it is that he's doing, and that shines through. Because I think the last thing he wants to be is the minister who cares, but then again is giving excuses for why his government's not delivering.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you very much, guys. That was a very good preview as to what we can kind of expect and look forward to when the House returns on Monday. I appreciate it as always. Andy, Neil, and Cam, thank you, and have a great weekend. And for our viewers, thank you for watching. We hope you'll join us next time. Take care.
Trucker.
Take care.
Bluesky Strategy Group is one of Canada's leading public affairs firms. For government relations, lobbying, and strategic communications advice across Canada, visit us at blueskystrategygroup.com. Bluesky Strategy Group is a proud member of the Global Communications Alliance.